This is a long story with an open ending. Who are the party that, for all intents and purposes, caused Brexit? Who are Britain's rabble-rousers that, for over 20 years, had been pushing for a referendum on Europe and finally got one? This video will look at the history of UKIP, where they came from, and their uncertain future. We start with the Bruges Group, a little-known collection of individuals who credited Margaret Thatcher with their founding. Promoting a less centralised Europe since 1989, the group claims they possess no party affiliation and instead exist as a think tank with notably Eurosceptic leanings. The reality, of course, is the group has a largely conservative bent and always has done. Two individuals that played a significant role in the group and also in our story are Alan Sked and Sir James Goldsmith. Goldsmith was the money man, an incredibly successful businessman who was able to pump money into the organisation. Sked, on the other hand, was the genius in the ivory tower, a lecturer at the London School of Economics. He published leaflets and attempted to spread a Eurosceptic message to the masses. Problem was, the Bruges Group's influence was limited, and the European Union was fast encroaching. The Maastricht Treaty, signed in 1992, heralded further European integration and the adoption of a single currency, the euro. Sked, frustrated with what he saw as the lacklustre activity of the Bruges Group, wanted to impress upon voters. In 1991, he formed the Anti-Federalist League, with the intention of raising awareness of the Maastricht Treaty but also making a dent electorally. This bemused the Bruges Group, who quickly distanced themselves from Sked and swiftly kicked him out. The 1992 general elections thoroughly undermined any grand ambitions Sked had of challenging the hegemony of the Conservative Party. The vast majority of the electorate would have had no idea who the Anti-Federalist League were, and fielding only 17 candidates who obtained an average of 0.5% of the vote, it was a disaster. The following year, Sked courted the support of the infamous Enoch Powell to aid a short-lived by-election campaign, which resulted in a vote share of around 1.3%. Nothing spectacular, even with the political heavyweight in the foreground. Things, obviously, had to change. Indeed, nationwide, things were changing. 1993 was a big year in British politics for an admittedly small reason. The BNP, the far-right British National Party, won their first council seat. This sparked national condemnation and a vicious public and political response to nationalism, all in the same month that Sked was to launch his new political project, the UK Independence Party. In choosing the name, Sked purposefully avoided the negative connotations British would have had about that time. Nevertheless, the accusation of far-right associations was to haunt the party for decades to come. The new party's first gander into the political gauntlet came the following year. The British public would vote in their fourth ever European Parliamentary elections, a little understood election that typically had a low turnout. The party managed to scrape the funds for a television advert, but other than that, had little in the way of electoral strategy or finance. The party scraped a meagre 1%, and the political earthquake that Sked had hoped for seemed little other than a pipe dream. This period was a difficult one for the fledgling party, as the formative years are for any political project. The issue for UKIP was they lacked coherence. What exactly were UKIP? For Sked, they were little other than a pressure group. This entailed not competing for seats that Eurosceptic Conservatives were competing for. It entailed purposefully shunning any seats won at the European Parliament out of both protest and principle. This meant the party were rather lacklustre in the policy department. Secondly, what were the public to think? Vote for us, vote for UKIP, oh but please check what the Conservative candidate says about Europe, because maybe you should vote for them instead? There was little attempt at basic branding here, let alone a fleshed out identity. Moreover, say they achieved their aim of an end to the European project. Were UKIP to continue, or were the party to shut shop and retire? These have all been perennial issues for the party, extant from the beginning. Not only were the party suffering from voter confusion and indifference, and internal upheaval, but also a threat from without. Chief financier of the Bruges Group, Sir James Goldsmith, founded the Referendum Party in 1994. Unlike UKIP, the party had a clear message. Vote for us and we will have a referendum on Europe. Then we will go away and you can go about your business. That was it. Despite having obvious associations with the Conservative Party, the Referendum Party abstained from dallying into any other political territory. It was a single-issue party in the strictest sense of the word. Of course, the party also benefited from the vast coffers and influence of its founder too. A plethora of celebrity endorsements followed. Goldsmith recruited full-time staff, obtained a party headquarters, built an infrastructure, all things that UKIP lacked the manpower, the finance and the political experience to accomplish at this point. To put the financial might of the party into perspective, the Referendum Party spent more on press coverage than any other party during the 1997 general elections. Moreover, Goldsmith made numerous media appearances, gave interviews, to wit, he was and his party became a household name. They fielded over 500 candidates nationwide. In contrast, UKIP's 1997 campaign was spearheaded by David Lott, a former pilot who decided to volunteer for UKIP in 1994. Lott would drive around in a van about the country attempting to construct a party from scratch. Their media coverage was basically non-existent. They fielded a paltry 194 candidates, which to be fair wasn't terrible, but they garnered 0.3% of the vote. They were simply spread far too thin. Indeed, only one candidate for UKIP managed to save their deposit, a former member of the Tory party, Nigel Farraj. Having been hammered by the Referendum Party at the ballot, UKIP devolved back into infighting. Alan Scared had proved too pie in the sky. He was a man of learning, of reasoned debate, but also of a dictatorial leadership style and little political wherewithal. Moreover, many in UKIP believed they should have tried harder to forge electoral allegiance with the Referendum Party. This was something Scared had failed to do. A contingent led by Nigel Farraj and David Lott ousted Scared. About this time, fortune also struck. The Referendum Party, UKIP's sole competitor, collapsed overnight. The Referendum Party was never really a sustainable project. It was artificially propped up by the mighty wealth of its founder, and when Sir James Goldsmith died, only months after the 1997 election, the party had nowhere to go and buckled. UKIP's new leader, the millionaire Michael Holmes, appointed Nigel Farraj national chairman. Farraj was briskly tasked with recruiting previous Referendum Party members to the party. This gave UKIP a much-needed opportunity to poach the politically experienced. In all, the party managed to acquire 150 or so referendum members willing to commit themselves to the UKIP project, and set the party up nicely to compete for the 1999 European Parliamentary elections, an election unlike any other the UK had had previously. Thanks to the European Parliamentary Elections Act of 1999, European parliamentary elections were now to be decided by a system of proportional representation. The first-past-the-post system in Britain makes it notoriously difficult for start-up parties to compete. However, now UKIP had an opportunity to gain representation. Nigel Farraj, spotting what a golden opportunity this presented, was quick to capitalise. He and David Lott spearheaded the campaign. Phone lines were set up and donations started pouring in, and UKIP had their first taste of success. 700,000 votes is nothing to turn your nose up at, and 7% of the vote share, even if it is an election with an exceptionally low turnout, is still 7% of the vote share. UKIP delivered 3 candidates to the European Parliament, including Nigel Farraj, and came fourth in a national election. Surely this was the beginning of a tidal wave for Britain's Eurosceptics? No. UKIP's first electoral success was followed by yet more disaster. The party once again devolved into infighting. Many in the party, including the now influential Nigel Farraj, were unhappy with Michael Holmes' leadership, and he was ousted in 2000 in a party dispute that nearly carved UKIP down the middle. Accusations of incompetency, paranoia, financial impropriety, arrogance ran rampant. But still, UKIP suffered from identity issues, and without a clearly demarcated identity, intra-party scuffles were inevitable. After Michael Holmes' bitter departure, Geoffrey Tickford became the new UKIP leader. Tickford was a political veteran, having been a Conservative councillor as well as the most successful Referendum Party candidate in the 1997 general election. He was to steer UKIP in a cautious direction, having seen the fate of the 2 party leaders before him. Indeed, for Tickford, UKIP leadership was a sort of uncomfortable balancing act. Leading the party into the 2001 elections was no easy feat. Tony Blair and New Labour, who had surged to power in the 1997 elections, were still easily on top. The Tories under William Hague crooked to the right and vowed to protect British sovereignty from an ever-encroaching European Union. In short, UKIP didn't really have anywhere to go and had no space to occupy. Labour at this point were untouchable, the Tories occupied the space that UKIP would have wanted to fill, and frankly, UK politics had no need for a Eurosceptic party with nothing else to offer. To make matters worse, organisationally the party was in dire straits. The 2001 general elections saw UKIP gain 1.5% of the vote, doing worse than the Referendum Party had done in 1997. In 2002, Geoffrey Tickford retired from leadership. Oddly enough, this transition occurred without drama. Tickford wasn't a bad leader and, to be honest, was exactly what the party needed. He was an accommodating and reassuring figure that gave space for the party to lick its wounds and regroup after the post-1999 European elections drama. He never delivered the party electoral victories, but frankly, his purpose was greater than that. He secured their continued existence, which was repeatedly in jeopardy. Tickford found himself replaced by Roger Nachman. Nachman was another political veteran and a former Tory MP, who had consistently railed against his party's embracing of the Maastricht Treaty, and thus UKIP was his natural home. He was to oversee a brief surge in support for the party thanks to two fortuitous events. The first was a chance encounter with Dick Morris. Morris was a highly successful political consultant who worked closely with Bill Clinton to secure his re-election in 1996. Morris was sympathetic to UKIP and agreed to help Nachman hone his campaign message. His two core pieces of advice were to adopt the phrase "say no" as a leading campaign slogan, and secondly to invest in billboards across the country. The second was the arrival of a celebrity, Robert Kilroy Silk. Kilroy about the time had achieved mainstream fame through his daily talk show, aptly named Kilroy. Prior to the launch of the show, Kilroy had been a strongly opinionated left-wing academic and a Labour MP that gained national infamy for his controversial pontificating. Kilroy was a socialist in the traditional and purist sense of the word. In January of 2004, Kilroy hit the headlines. An article of his was republished by the Sunday Express entitled "We Owe Arabs Nothing." In it, he opined modern-day Arab states to contribute nothing to the world bar oil, and went on to say that despotic, barbarous and corrupt Arab states were populated by suicide bombers, limb amputators and women repressors. Needless to say, this went down like a lead balloon and the BBC cancelled his programme. It was about this time that Kilroy became drawn to UKIP and a deal was struck. A mass campaign began. Donors opened wallets to provide Kilroy with the media space he needed to raise the party's profile, and this attracted additional celebrities to boot. Kilroy shifted UKIP into a notably populist direction for the first time. Gone were the academic and detached messages of the Alan Sked days. Kilroy vociferously talked of the coming Eastern European invasion, unlimited immigration, an out-of-touch elite, unelected bureaucrats, talking points that would stay with UKIP from this point forward. In short, this was a resoundingly successful strategy, and UKIP membership ballooned to 24,000 by 2004. And the 2004 European elections saw UKIP win the most votes yet, with a staggering 2.6 million people crossing the UKIP box on the ballot, and consequently the party gained 12 MEPs. Things weren't all coming up roses though. Kilroy had an ego. Unsurprisingly really, and perhaps his ego wasn't unwarranted. Thing is, he started to increasingly pull his weight, which unsettled the rank and file. He publicly hinted to the press that he was planning a party coup to kick Nachman to the curb and become leader himself. And why not? After all, he was largely responsible for UKIP's ballooning in size and scope. The problem that many had was that he hadn't earned his stripes in the party. Here was a celebrity coming along, hijacking a party that many had put their blood, sweat and tears into for years. And here he was, after barely 4 months, attempting to claim ownership of it. Sensing the general mood of the party, David Lott and Nigel Farraj swiftly sided with the party foot soldiers and Robert Nachman, and attempted to precipitously decapitate Kilroy's coup attempt. Kilroy left the party, and by the 2005 general elections, the spent party was again in the political wilderness. UKIP had barely gained 2% of the vote. One of the reasons UKIP consistently did so poorly in general elections was its lack of grassroots activists working in local constituencies. UKIP never seemed to gain a local presence anywhere, which severely curtailed its ability to farm votes at general elections. About this time, a chief competitor to UKIP was rising, the British National Party under Nick Griffin. Griffin was able to turn the BNP into a community-oriented party. He recognised the BNP could never broadly compete against mainstream parties, and so focused the party's efforts in specific local wards where support was either already extant or latent. These wards were canvassed heavily, with campaigns strongly focusing on local issues, which enabled the BNP to become strong local competitors. Pundits and political analysts were already discussing in 2005 the shared electorate both the BNP and UKIP were competing for. The thing for UKIP was they were being battered by the BNP when the two were in direct competition. This led some powerful people within UKIP to entertain the idea of an electoral pact between the two parties. Just as this seemed destined to be so, someone stood in the way. It was time for Nigel Farraj to stand up and become UKIP leader. Having been a party member since the party's inception in 1993, Farraj had the credentials and the trust and backing of the party membership. To be honest, 2005 was an opportune moment. The party was in a slump, but change was certainly in the air. David Cameron became leader of the Conservative Party and moved the party sharply to the left on social issues after little success pressing rightwards to compete with New Labour. Labour were continuing with a policy of mass immigration, the likes of which the country had never seen, and dissatisfaction and disaffection were growing. Notably, two groups were becoming increasingly politically alienated: the white working class, who traditionally would have voted Labour, and upper middle class Southerners who had previously found their home among the Tories. The party had already managed to attract a swathe of working class support thanks to Kilroy's brief foray, and thus Kilroy's involvement into UKIP had demonstrated the efficacy of a populist strategy able to target both disillusioned Tory and Labour voters alike. Nigel Farraj thus finally decided to push UKIP into a fully fledged political party, with a strong emphasis on issues like immigration, smaller government, a flat tax and grammar schools. About the same time, the Conservatives were biting back, as confrontational politicians and media outlets attempted to equate UKIP with the BNP to undercut their legitimacy. One dependable the media could always rely upon to condemn UKIP was party founder Alan Sked. Sked would reliably attack the party before each election, writing in a national newspaper prior to the 2004 European elections that the party was racist, infected by the far right, was less liberal than the BNP, and working symbiotically with them. David Cameron himself quipped before the 2006 local elections that the party was chock-a-block with fruitcakes, loonies and closet racists. To be fair, there was no doubt that UKIP and the BNP were edging closer together between 2005 and 2008. This was much to the chagrin of Farraj, who did all he could to quell what he saw as an infiltration. In the end, Farraj kicked out those on the National Executive Committee who favoured working with the BNP, and the party from there on out explicitly forbade prior BNP members from joining the party. The 2009 European elections were UKIP's for the taking. Amidst financial crisis and a politician's expenses scandal, this was the perfect time for UKIP to put their anti-elite populist message to good use. The party did exceedingly well, coming in at second place behind the Tories. Most crucially, the BNP was trounced, and success was most potent in areas highly populated by low-skilled workers. UKIP was becoming a potent force among the British working classes. Despite taking the party to unprecedented heights, Nigel Farraj stepped down. Farraj wasn't simply party leader but also party factotum. He was doing virtually everything and decided it was high time to take a back seat. His elected replacement was Lord Pearson, who took the party in a more radical and populist direction. Months prior to his election as leader of UKIP, he had been in close correspondence with Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. In fact, Pearson managed to get Wilders' film Fitna broadcast to the House of Lords. This emphasis didn't come from nowhere. This was about the time that the English Defence League started to gain serious traction throughout the country, and anxiety about the role of Islam in the UK was increasing. Pearson also introduced the idea of Britain implementing Swiss-style referenda, the repeal of the Human Rights Act, the withdrawal of public funds from the promotion of multiculturalism, etc. All facets of a civic nationalism that UKIP would become famous for. Pearson never really enraptured the party though. He had historically been closely aligned with the Tories and was still of the persuasion that UKIP should cooperate with Eurosceptic Conservatives when possible. This was hugely out of step with the tone of UKIP's populism. The party was sending the awkward message of condemning the out-of-touch political elites, but suggesting working with them when it suits. Many of UKIP's working class base detested the idea of cooperating with Tory MPs and believed Pearson was undermining UKIP's efforts to forge an identity of its own beyond simply being a single-issue party. The results in some cases was all-out rebellion. UKIP candidates refused to stand down from elections where Pearson thought the party should get behind the Tory candidate. The general elections of 2010 saw UKIP win an unremarkable 3.1% of the vote, and obviously win no seats. Pearson stepped down, citing his lack of ability as leader and lack of support from within the party. After the 2010 elections, the political landscape of Britain was very different. The third biggest party and the main recipient of protest votes after the financial scandal, the Liberal Democrats, had been brought into power via coalition with the Conservative Party. Now the protest party was one with the establishment, the Tories were in power, Labour were deeply unpopular, and the BNP was collapsing. This was UKIP's time to present itself as the country's premier opposition force. Farraj returned as leader, pushing strongly the party's domestic policies against immigration and national identity, and focused party resources on local elections, targeting seats with a large population of working class voters. By the 2013 local elections, the party was able to achieve an average vote share of over 20% in the wards it contested. The true watershed moment, however, came with the 2014 European Parliamentary elections, where UKIP became the foremost British party represented in the European Parliament. The party have still struggled to gain national representation, though. Throughout the party's history, they've only managed to obtain 2 members of Parliament, a number which currently stands at 0. Moreover, the members of Parliament that UKIP did manage to get cut their teeth in the Conservative Party, and both won through re-election after switching allegiances from Conservative to UKIP. The point in mentioning this is UKIP to this day have struggled to forge a domestic identity beyond rejection of the EU, especially so post-referendum. The 2015 elections saw UKIP scoop up just under 4 million votes, and officially saw them become the 3rd largest party in Britain, but with basically no national representation. David Cameron, in the run-up to the election, promised a referendum on the EU. He made good, and we all know how that went. Farraj stepped back again in 2016, and with their main reason for existence being fulfilled, the party had to find an identity. Put simply, this hasn't been easy for UKIP. This has been the central crux of the video. Who are UKIP? There was a brief moment between 2013 and 2015 that UKIP genuinely became a main contender. Never especially as a nationally elected presence, but certainly one with a huge degree of legitimacy, public influence, and what was approaching a national vision. However, this created a new problem. In the eyes of the public, UKIP was Nigel Farraj. Honestly, you could turn on the television at virtually any time of day and be fairly certain to see the loudmouthed and bumptious Farraj. When he stepped down, not only had the party lost their reason for existence, but also their chief asset. Paul Nuttall, a party stalwart and long-time proponent of chasing the working class vote, became leader, but also was hugely unsuccessful. The 2017 general election saw UKIP's vote decline by 3.5 million, losing votes to both Labour, that was beginning to return to traditional socialism, and the Tories, who shifted rightward again under Theresa May. Predictably, Nuttall stepped down. So then, who are UKIP? That question is perhaps more difficult to answer now than ever before. The party leader as it currently stands is Henry Bolton, a man who the public found thoroughly unremarkable, that is, until he recently became embroiled in a scandal. Bolton has publicly left his wife and coupled with Joe Marnie, a fellow UKIPper, a model and 30 years younger than he is. Maybe this will help raise the party profile again, but surely for the wrong reasons. I don't know. Farraj didn't seem too set back by this, quipping that at least the public know who Henry Bolton is now. Meh. The alternative to Bolton was Anne-Marie Waters, someone that has spent the majority of her time in the public eye railing against Islam. To be fair, nothing she has said has been much more extreme than anything that came out of Lord Pearson's mouth. Thing is, the party was in the process of desperately trying to claw its way back from irrelevancy and working to rebuke the accusations that the party was nothing more than a single-issue group. The election of Waters would simply have sedimented this perception, only now the single issue wouldn't have been so much the EU as Islam. So, in a nutshell, that's UKIP, a much requested video that I hope I've done justice to. The party right now are in limbo. They've so far failed to remain relevant post-Brexit, but I suspect, without Nigel Farraj, the party would have struggled regardless. Brexit vote or no Brexit vote. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you liked the video, don't forget to click like and please do subscribe if you haven't already. If you didn't, hey, click dislike, leave a comment, tell me where I went wrong. As always, huge thank you to all of my patrons. It's thanks to you guys that these videos are regular. As always, if it's within your means to do so, please do consider becoming a patron yourself. Thanks again, and until next time.